confused with the recent hike in interest rate. That's because of a monetary policy change due to inflation. One reason is inflation. So usually when there's a budget deficit, government has to borrow money from the country or from other countries as well. If they borrow from the own country, then they have to issue bonds and debentures, and that will result in interest rates going up to make it more attractive for these investors to invest in the government. And current account deficit, difference between imports and exports. So these two combinedly, when these two get combined, that would result in an overall depreciation of your currency. What do you mean by depreciation? Rupee depreciated. Do you know how these exchange rates are determined? Exchange rates are determined freely by the demand and supply. Is more, the rupee's value will go up. If the demand for, give me a second. All right. So I was just talking about demand and supply of the currencies. If the demand for rupee is high, the demand for rupee is high, then value of the rupee can go up. If the demand for dollar is high, value of the dollar can go up. So when your imports are higher than exports, what will happen is imports means you are importing from different countries. You are importing from different countries. To buy those goods, to buy those goods, you need to pay in their respective currencies. If you are buying from, let's say, US, from different countries, or from Europe, you have to pay in their currencies. When that happens, you need to buy those currencies. You need to buy those currencies. So when you buy those currencies, the demand for those currencies go up. Demand for those currencies go up. Therefore, value of those currencies also go up. So what happens is, when that happens, dollar, GBP, those currencies appreciate, and your local currency, rupee, depreciates. Your local currency, rupee, depreciates. So that's why your rupee has been depreciating for a long time. Since 1970s to now, you can see rupee to dollar rate. The rate has depreciated a lot. It has depreciated a lot. That's one of the main reasons for that. So therefore, I can identify this twin deficit as the main. Twin means two things: budget shortfall and the current account deficit as the main reason behind this issue. That means Sri Lanka was anyway going for an issue like this, but it got accelerated during last couple of years due to some reasons I have mentioned here. One reason is a tax cut in 2019. They reduced most of the taxes. Immediately, as general public, we feel that when there's a tax cut, it's better for us. But as a government, as a country, looking at the macroeconomic situation is not so good. I mean, we had a tax cut and most enjoyed, but A second, I just got connected to my proper Wi-Fi. Right. I was talking about tourism. So one of the main sources of foreign income Sri Lanka has is tourism. Tourism. And what happened for this tourism income? That was almost closer to zero during the pandemic. So it was almost nil. So now you can imagine, so no foreign remittances to us. Right? So pandemic like sort of accelerated this issue. And then there were certain decisions taken by the government like banning the fertilizer chemical. So that resulted in a drop in your production. And further to that, we had the Ukraine war. Because of Ukraine war, you could see the oil prices went up. When these oil prices go up, what happens is your fuel prices go up. When these fuel prices go up, everything in the economy gets affected. Even vegetable prices can go up because you have to transport the vegetables. And if you look at what happened here, global oil prices went up. Further, that Sri Lanka had a personal problem, which is personal to Sri Lanka. That is exchange rate problem because you pay in dollars to these fuel, rupee depreciated, rupee depreciated. Further, that oil prices also went up. So you sort of got two hits at the same time, and finally your fuel prices went up a lot, and that resulted in a lot of prices going up. Therefore, I'll come to the inflation. One reason for this inflation is oil prices. One reason, right? One reason, oil prices. Now you understand how Ukraine war affected, and even further than this, Russia and Ukraine, this war, and been exporting tea, black tea to Russia. We've been exporting certain items to Ukraine as well, Europe, and the demand for these items went down, and that also resulted in some of our export revenues falling. So therefore, we had a lot of issues. Most of these things happened unfavorably to Sri Lanka. And those things got together and this situation was created. And if you look at for power cuts, there was no enough fuel because if you look at Sri Lanka, power and electricity, like majority is from coal and then from fuel. So renewable energy counts for a very small percentage. And during this period, this is a very bad period for renewable energy because these few months you don't get rains. This is a dry month. This period starting from January, February, March, right? Especially February, March, April. These are dry months for hydropower plants. Therefore, you don't get enough renewable energy. So the only source that they have is solar power, but that is also still being developed. It's not enough in Sri Lanka. And Sri Lanka does not have the battery power technology where you store, I mean, in a mega scale, but for like small houses, you can get your batteries done. You have that, but for at a mega level, CB level, you don't store power. You just generate, distribute on. Had we got that technology also, we would have some for the night, some, not a lot. So that is also not happening. So power and energy is a different crisis that we should talk about, because if you look at in CB in Sri Lanka, the consumer tariff is far lesser than their costs, far lesser, right? If you pay maybe, I think it's around 12 to 15 rupees, the consumer tariff. But for a unit generated in these thermal power plants, they pay around more than 150 rupees. You can imagine the loss. The basic business model itself is a loss, right? Therefore, if they do power cuts, they actually save money. CB as an organization saves money when they do the power cuts. Now you can imagine the crisis that we are in, a lot of areas in the crisis, right? Right. So you need a lot of fuel. If you want to electrify this country, you need a lot of fuel. To buy fuel, we need dollars. And we don't have dollars to buy for. We have very less dollars. So everything has got connected. And finally, what happened was like towards the end of March, and we started getting, actually we started power cards even before that. Like small power cards got like aggregated to like 5 hours, 7 hours, sometimes 9 hour power cards, and people couldn't bear the power cards, prices going up, and finally it led to a huge civil unrest in the country. Civil unrest in the country, right? So that's the story. So if I'm to summarize the story, what happened to Sri Lanka? So you had a budget shortfall associated with the current account deficit. Is because the way we've been doing things, been importing a lot, exporting less, so can't help. And we didn't have a plan actually. We didn't have a long-term plan, right? And that got accelerated during past couple of years due to the tax cut, pandemic, chemical fertilizer issue, Ukraine war, all that got together, and even electricity problem. This is not the best time for renewable energy. Everything got together, and finally the bomb blasted, right? And it led to huge impact. What happened to America has a lot of debt. That's the next point I want to talk about. We have over 50 billion, around 51 billion US dollar debt. And Sri Lanka defaulted its first debt repayment in on 12th of April, as I remember, 12th of April. And let's see whether we are a bankrupt country or not. We'll look at it. I'll give my perspective to that. My perspective. And we have got so much of debt. And when you get debt from overseas countries, we should know that we should utilize these funds in projects that give you enough returns. And in Sri Lanka, the projects for which they invested the money did not give sufficient returns. Therefore, we didn't get enough, we didn't produce enough cash or profits to pay it back. That's another issue. Right? So root cause of this issue is a twin deficit. It got accelerated by these tax cuts and all, and debt also can be seen as another problem. Now the twin deficit I explained, and now the inflation is rising prices, and people felt the inflation a lot. So I would say why general public got together, because economists knew this issue, people who knew a bit of economics, but the general public, they felt these issues. The economic policies were not the best. The people started feeling that when prices of goods services went up, and when they got these power cuts, inflation. So inflation is where people felt it. Is it due to money printing? They print a lot of money, and there were certain statements by certain public figures that inflation is not due to money printing and all that. I can explain why they made those comments. If you look at in basic economics, we learn this concept where when you print money, or when you print money means you increase the money supply. Maybe government can print money and give it to general public as incentives, and or they can issue it to send through the central bank to the banking system, and you can borrow from the banks. So it increases money supply. So when there's more money in the economy, people have more money in their hands, then they go and buy more and more goods. When they buy more and more goods, what will happen is demand for goods go up. You know that when demand for goods, a particular good or two goes up, let's say everyone wants to buy, let's say gold or bread, whatever. So everyone wants bread. So the bread producers like to increase the prices, so you can sell a lot, because when there's bigger demand, you can sell a lot. So therefore, when you have a lot of money being circulated, demand goes up, the prices can go up. So that's one reason. That can be one reason, but that's not the biggest reason behind the inflation that we are experiencing. The biggest reason is the exchange rate or rupee depreciation. The rupee depreciation happened Due to a couple of reasons. One reason is the twin deficit, and this huge amount of loans that we have taken. So if you look at the main reason when inflation is the rupee depreciation. Why rupee depreciated? So central bank held the dollar rupee rate at 203 for some time. But what happened was the market rates were different. Therefore, it created a black market. When things are not happening in the natural way, people find a black market starts operating. So everyone used to transfer their funds through that black market, and there were different systems, and those systems are offering a higher amount for a dollar when central bank and the banking system gave 203, or they gave additional 10 rupees sometimes. 203, let's say 210, 15 per dollar, but these systems were giving 220, 30, 40, it went up, right? So central bank could not hold it, and there was no way that they could hold, only they had to float the rupee. So when they floated it, now you can see it's in 375 ranges officially, but still it's being depreciated, and the black market it operates somewhere around 400 rupees now for a dollar. So that shows the real value of the rupee, and why it went to that level is we have been maintaining a deficit, our imports, exports, and there were no plans to improve. Like, you need plan, you have to improve your exports, you need more export revenue to the country, you need to earn more dollars, foreign income to the country. We didn't have many long-term plans for that. So that's the reason. So therefore, the main reason behind the current inflation that we are undergoing partially can be due to money printing, partially I would say, but more than that, it's due to the exchange rate depreciation. So it's actually due to a lot of economic policies which are not so proper, I would say. So the economic policies, because central bank can impose a lot of policies and the Minister of Finance, but there can be political intervene happening for these policies. That can be the reason for this economic mismanagement. So you can see this chart is from World Bank. Amount of money as your percentage of your GDP, gross domestic production, GDP. If you look at in Sri Lanka, the debt is 61%. 61%, right? In 2018, in 2020 can be even higher, slightly higher. But you can see compared to UK, it's at 160 plus. If this developed country, they have more debt compared to their GDP. They have more debt. So Sri Lanka can take more debt, but the problem, right? The problem, more than the debt, how we utilize the debt is the problem. How we utilize that. As an example, let's say you take a bank loan and you eat and you go on trips, right? And how do you pay? You have to find another source of income to pay. Instead, you take a loan, you start your own business. From the money you earn from the business, you repay the loan. So you have a plan to repay the loan. So therefore, you have to utilize these funds in projects that give proper returns. That is the problem. Problem is not borrowing. Problem is not the borrowing, but how we utilize. So debt to GDP ratio. So Sri Lanka, so 2020, 86, around 86%, USD 120 plus. So it's not about the debt. It's not about the debt, right? It's not about the debt, but how we use the debt. So less return on investment on the projects. And another reason I can tell you. The other reason is the investment costs in these projects are very high compared to market prices. Very high. So it can be the infrastructure development like highways and all, can be different structures being built, but costs are very high. It's not the market prices. So costs are very high, right? So there's no transparency on how you selected those contractors, how you spent it, right? And return on those projects are not giving returns also. So it's like you've just taken debt and you're not earning anything. And even like you've taken excessive amount of money, like let's say to like manufacture a chair, I need, let's say, 5,000 rupees, but I've actually spent like 20,000 rupees to manufacture that chair. So you don't know where the money has gone. And that chair also doesn't give me any benefit. It's just there. That is the problem. That's why people are sort of asking, saying that give our money. That's the reason. So they are blaming the government for doing all that. Now we have the problem. Are we bankrupt? Are we bankrupt? My answer is no. We are not a bankrupt country. So that's why we have a positivity. Despite a lot of negativity in Sri Lanka, we have a lot of positivity as well. We are not a bankrupt country. We are a very, very privileged country to be. I'm stressing on that. We are a very privileged country, just that we are undergoing some difficult times due to some wrong decisions, some delayed decisions, some mismanagements. Still, with all that, net wealth in Sri Lanka is 351 billion US dollars, net wealth, after deducting your debt of 51 billion. So it's 400 billion worth country. You have assets worth that amount, right? You have assets worth that amount. So net wealth, we still have net wealth, we are not bankrupt. Bankrupt means you don't have assets even. If you sell all these assets, we have an excess. If we sell all these assets, I'm not asking to sell, but if we sell these assets, we can settle all this debt, right? But I'm not asking to sell because that's against, like, the rights of Sri Lanka, like Sri Lankan people. You don't like to sell Sri Lankan assets. So what are the solutions now? So I was explaining the issues that we're experiencing. The solutions wise, one is getting support from IMF. This was long overdue, but why the government did not want to go for IMF is because if you go and restructure your debt from IMF, one issue can be actually you have to go through their conditions, like to free float the rupee, and you have to show more transparency, and they'll get involved in some administration. Likewise, that's the reason when they do then taxes you have to increase. They do that immediately, it can result in dissatisfaction in the people. So they didn't want to be unpopular. That's the reason. But had they taken this decision and become a little bit unpopular, they wouldn't have been this much unpopular, I would say, because of this delayed decision. One reason, delayed decision, it led to this worse situation. So if when IMF get involved, you can get a haircut, means like some amount of debt. They will negotiate with those countries and reduce that debt, and they will structure it in a way that Sri Lanka can pay it, and they will ensure that Sri Lanka generates enough money to pay it. That is the support from IMF. In addition to that, you had another option. You have certain friendly countries you would have borrowed. But the issue is if you keep on borrowing, you are more obligated to those countries. That is the problem. Whereas IMF is the International Monetary Fund, so which represents most of the countries in the world. So getting from IMF would be a better option than having an obligation to a country, maybe to China or and India, country like that. Then another solution is we can mortgage some of the assets and get some loans. We can mortgage. But the thing is, politically, it's very difficult. I'm asking for all the assets, maybe selected assets, couple of assets, but it's not a very popular option. Even personally, I might also not like it because of the situation we are in, that can be one option. So they get absolute ownership over rights of Sri Lankan assets and get the loans. When that happens, they get the rights of our assets for some time period, and the debt is there. You don't need to. We don't have a pressure to repay the debt. Also, we just need to service the interest on it. So that's not a very popular preferred option, though it's there because we have a good asset base. Or selling some of the assets, Sri Lankan, some of the assets, not all. Selling some of the assets would ease the pressure. Selling some of the assets. But these option number 2 and 3, those are not so popular. But to overcome the situation, these two can be some immediate solutions. Even IMF, not very immediate, but you will get the results maybe during a couple of years. And these assets also selling or whatever will give you results for a couple of years. So those are like combinations we'll have to look at. And the long-term solution is to have proper industrial policy, basically to fix our trade deficit and increase our exports. That's the way forward. So you have to earn more and more foreign income. But that takes time. So the government has to support. Government has to use whatever the money that they borrow from other countries, so IMF, on this. So industrial policies, you can come up with new technology companies, clusters of companies that produce different items. So in a nutshell, what I'm saying is, let's try to improve our exports. So then what happens is your current account will get sorted, and try to cut down government expenses as well, because been reporting budget deficit to try to reduce that. Because if you look at some of the government departments and all that, those are overstaffed. So that's one reason. I mean, even there are a lot of areas where you can cut off some unnecessary expenses from the government. I think that's what general public is forcing to do now, even to reduce unnecessary expenses of the government, right? And so with that, you should be able to minimize your budget, reduce your budget deficit, and by increasing exports and facilitating the industries in the country, that will help you to get more export income that should sort out your budgetary deficit. Current account deficit. So when you combinedly, but it takes time to do all that. Combinedly, it should solve the issue, but it will take time. These economic policies take time to deliver results. So immediate solution, looking at the options we have suggested, IMF would be solution, or you can go to a different country and restructure, get your loans, part of your loans restructured. But because IMF is a global organization representing most of the countries in the world, going for IMF would be the most feasible option in the short run, which Sri Lanka is doing right now. And some more suggestions from my end, because now the country is at a political unrest. When a country is at political unrest, the production is less and investor confidence is less. Less investment is coming to Sri Lanka. That means less dollars coming to Sri Lanka, because politically we are not stable now. Therefore, we need an immediate political reform. It can be maybe a caretaker government or an interim government. That's what people want. I mean, sending all the ministers home will not be an immediate solution, but they can form an interim government or a caretaker government that leads to an election maybe in 6 months to 1 year's time. And to take decisions, maybe they can appoint certain committees that comprises of knowledgeable individuals, and through those committees, they should be making decisions. So that kind of a political reform is required. I just mentioned briefly, there should be, otherwise the civil unrest will not stop. Then with the political reform, the economic reform also should start, because without the political reform, if you go only with with an economic reform, it won't give the best results, because investor confidence is not there. You can see what has happened to share market. Share market has been going down, but recent couple of days there was certain foreign buys, but share market has been going down overall. Foreign investors have been selling their shares, right? So share market is not performing. Foreign investments are not coming to the country. So therefore, there's no confidence in foreign investors. Even local investors, there's no confidence, right? So there should be a political reform and an economic reform. Other than that, the control environment should be very high. You should have a sound control environment, like if government borrows funds for the project, so there should be proper procurement committees evaluating these suppliers, awarding to the best court, right? There should be transparency in all that. The audit should happen. And what I'm saying is, because the funds have not been utilized properly, so projects, the feasibility of the project should be evaluated. You should check whether these projects are giving enough returns, and you should check whether we are giving to the best supplier with the required quality at the lowest cost, right? So you need to have all those controls, and there should be a better control environment. And if IMF gets involved, they will definitely look into these aspects. So some more suggestions. So therefore, we have to wait and see now what's going on, and at the same time, because some economic reforms are happening, the same time we have to push for these political reforms as well. And that's what these protesters are doing, including you and me. So we are also part of this country. So we are also protesting for all that, and we are actually we use our time to give a message to the government that these reforms should happen. It's yours and mine duty. And talking about personal finance and personal development, so in a situation like that, before going to finance, I would say let's be motivated, right? Motivated. Don't get disheartened. Don't think that your future is lost. Yes, we know there are certain barriers, but these barriers can be overcome. So inflation and all that, as I told you, the reason behind the recent interest rate hike is to attack the inflation, because when inflation is high, governments try to increase the interest rate, so monetary supply goes down, less loans in the economy, so monetary supply goes down, and demand for goods can go down, so that would create a downward pressure on the prices. Prices can go down, but it will take maybe at least 1 year to get settled. So if they didn't do that, we might go even into a hyperinflationary environment. So that's very dangerous, right? So to counter inflation, they increase interest rates. So can't help, the rates are high, so now we can't borrow, but things will get sorted little by little. So we'll have to wait maybe 2.5 years, at least 2 years. We'll have to sacrifice. But you might think, why are we sacrificing? Because of this mismanagement of some other people, but can't help. I mean, if anyone thinks that this debt has been used for certain personal agendas, if anyone thinks so, there are ways to recover that also, but very difficult. But there are ways to do that. But even if you don't do that, there are ways to recover with support from IMF and with proper policies. So what you should be doing personally, because inflation is 29.8, food inflation 47% April. This is as per the central bank statistics. And if you looked at certain international indexes, the year-on inflation, they have reported 120% due with the exchange rate fluctuation. Therefore, what do you mean by this? Meaning is, if you have money, If the money doesn't get interest, at least to compensate for inflation, your purchasing power goes down. That is the problem. Therefore, you have to invest your money in securities that gives you rate more than inflation. But the problem is now we don't have such securities in the Sri Lanka, because treasury bills is the most safest instrument that we have. It gives you 3 months treasury bill around 25% so there will be further increases because the inflation is high. There can be further increases in treasury bill rate. So my advice is, if you're investing in treasury bills, invest in 3 months treasury bills, and after 3 months, take it out and put it again. That's one area, but that is not sufficient to counter inflation right now. Therefore, if you really want to counter, then we'll have to look at other investments like share market. The share market is down, but you have to invest and keep it for some time, at least 1.5 years. When it reaches the peak, you can sell it, but you are taking a risk there. Treasury bills, that is risk free. If you invest in share market, risk is high, and the possible return is also high. Sometimes you can double your money also. People did that, right? And another mean, which is not advised by the banking system, but which is happening, is cryptocurrencies. So study on cryptocurrencies and try to increase. There can be gains, but these are sort of high risk, high return methods, because the safest method that we have, those are not giving much returns. That's the reason why I thought of introducing this. You might wonder, are we to buy land, are we to buy gold? But gold prices are a little bit higher in Sri Lanka, therefore, compared to other countries, that's not a recommendation. Even property prices, real estate, we anticipate that real estate prices can go down. Right now, those are not proper investments. But if you theoretically look at, gold and real estate can be good investments to counter inflation. But in Sri Lanka, looking at Sri Lanka's context, those are not advisable. What I can advise is share market and crypto. And our financial markets are not so developed. In other countries, you have instruments like inflation-linked bonds. When inflation goes up, those bonds give you more returns. But unfortunately, we are in a country with very primary financial market. Therefore, we don't have those options. The only option that we have is T-bills. So bank deposits are actually giving a lesser return compared to T-bills, which is a bit contradictory to the theory of finance, but that's how it's happening right now. So treasury bills would be the safest investment, as is sees or keep very little cash with you for your day-to-day expenses, and ensure that you do not enter to bigger commitments, less commitments, right? So reduce your commitments, try to increase your avenues of income. That's what you should be doing these days. I mean, even if you uh, grow something in your home and sell it or consume, it saves money for you. So we'll have to go to that economy, trying to increase your income sources. Like, you provide a small service, right? Maybe you can teach, or if you can teach, you can record some lectures and sell it in an online platform. So do things like that, right? Try to earn little by little. If that is foreign currency related, is better, right? So try to increase your income avenues and do not get into commitments these days. Reduce your commitments. And I mean, if you're planning to get a loan and all, this is not the time, because rates are 20+ percentages, even 30% for some of the finance companies. This is not the time. Don't enter these commitments, right? So reduce your commitments and work on these investments. Keep cash required only for your day-to-day expenses. All right. So that's what I wanted to cover, and keep yourselves motivated. Don't get disheartened. Things can get sorted soon, because we are seeing a lot of changes in the government, and they can be slow to respond, but definitely they'll have to respond. So finally, it will be the people's voice, because government or the parliament should represent people's voice. Finally, at the end of the day, it's people's voice. Therefore, I think Sri Lanka as a country, I would say most of the people have got together and demanding for the same. because we couldn't bear what's going on. I know we've been a bit late, but still we have room for improvement. We may have to maybe undergo similar issues for next 1.5 years, but with IMF funds coming in little by little, you will start feeling the concessions. Maybe taxes wise, they will like give some concessions to general public. Maybe they can increase the rates for corporates. Likewise, there can be certain because businesses are in a position to afford taxes better compared to like people, general public. Likewise, they might try to give certain concessions, but little by little, right? But we'll have to get adjusted with these what do you call the price levels and the exchange rates. I don't think that rates will go down, but rates will have to get adjusted. But with that, our income, all those things will slowly get adjusted, but we'll have to pay attention, right? So let me take the questions that I got. One question: can we compare and predict economy with countries like Argentina and Lebanon? I don't think you should look into those. You can always see what happened, but the thing is, it will not replicate. Each and every country has a unique story, so it won't happen the same way. You can see what went on, but it won't be the same. Don't worry. Why there's a discrepancy in the inflation? That's a very good question. Different, the international universities professor told it's 120%, 190% rather, but our news you are seeing 20 to 30 percentages because the way you are measuring, because it's from the basket of goods consumer price index, it has a lot of elements. Some certain elements are not being used much. Therefore, when you look at as overall, it's calculated as 20 to 30% ranges. But this international professor's calculation is based on purchasing power parity theory. He has looked at the exchange rate depreciation and captured that. If you look at prices of some items, you can see now cement prices. I remember like 900 or whatever, and went up to like 3,000 rupees. So it's kind of I don't know, like 3,000 means like 3 times, right? 3 times. So around 220, 30% up. Therefore, certain items have, increased by a percentage which is higher than this inflation rate reported by the professor also, right? So why we feel it more like depends on the things that we consider. Like if you are constructing a house and all, you will feel it more if you're buying cement. It depends on the items that you consume. If you consume a lot of imported items, you will feel it more, right? But for our calculation in a consumer price index in Sri Lanka, we use a basket of goods by looking at like everyone in the economy. Therefore, it gives you a very average out figure where certain items have not increased by a very significant percentage also. That's the reason. Then some people argue if all government-owned companies will be privatized, we can solve the problem. What is the idea? It's good, but you have to keep one fact in your mind that if you privatize, some of these government departments, government organizations, those are overstaffed. That is the problem. So when those are overstaffed, then as a business, you will have to take certain calls, like reduce staff. So that you should have a solution for that if you are doing that, because you can't like fire people. You can't then unemployment, different problem. Therefore, the government has to develop industries, create employment, then only you can privatize. Let's say you're trying to privatize CB, yes, can do that. But if you evaluate this requirement compared to the workforce, if you see the workforce is too high, where CB cannot bear, which is the case right now with their income, then it's not the best, because at the end of the day, the welfare of the public also should be taken into consideration. Therefore, yes, privatizing is good because it will be more efficient. Having said that, we should have a plan for these people, so we can't fire people. Therefore, it's not easy. Like you should to create industries, you need investment. You need foreign investors to come and put up companies in Sri Lanka. To do that, you need political certainty. Like a lot of things are connected, right? That's why we need a strong political and economic reform. I tried to simplify this as much as possible. Hope you all understood what I was trying to say about the economy. This is my perspective, and there can be different perspectives. Different economists will give different perspectives. So these are like my views on the Sri Lanka and Sri Lankan economy and the recovery. All right. So if you have further questions, you can always direct to us. We are happy to answer, and you can follow my page, which goes with a lot of articles and all that. Akila Gunarathna is my name. You can follow, and I have done my views. I've given my views in a set of articles. You can refer all that if you're interested. Over to you, Dewmini.
All right, thank you so much, sir. And I would like to invite the audience to ask your questions. If you have any questions, you can use Sinhala as well to raise your questions. So, sir, I have got a question telling that even after we get out of this situation, this economic crisis, will the dollar rate be at the same price or will it be reduced?
From the history, it has never reduced. Therefore, even what I feel is it will be kind of stable at a similar rate. It won't go down. Even if that goes down, maybe 5-10 rupees, it won't go down further. But you can't say a lot because economists predict things will not happen the same way. But from the history, what I can say is it has never gone backwards. It has always moved up. And regarding the exchange rates, central bank has no control now because they can control if they have reserves. So we don't have dollar reserves. If we have reserves, you have a technique called pegging. So you can put the reserves out, dollars out, and create a demand for rupee, and or maybe you increase dollar supply. That means you create a demand for rupee and appreciate it. They have done it previously, even previously under different presidents. The similar issues have happened, but they have controlled it because they had the reserves to put. Now we don't have reserves. Therefore, central bank has very less control over that. So what I feel is it will be stable at a higher level. It will never go back to normal levels that we used to have.
All right, another question is there, sir. Some people argue if all the government-owned companies will be privatized, we can solve some of these problems. I think she asks about your ideas about that condition.
Yeah, I think we already answered that question. Privatization is good. It will be efficient. However, we should have a plan for the workforce. Don't dismiss the workforce when it creates more unemployment. That's also bad for the economy. Therefore, we need to have a plan for these people working in government organizations. If they are overstaffed, then only we can think of privatization.
Another question. In the future, will we be out of essential goods in Sri Lanka due to this economic crisis? I mean, they ask about imports and productions, I guess.
Yes. I would say for a certain time period, yes, now also we don't have some of the things. Essentials, they try to get it somehow because you are getting support from IMF. There can be certain short-term loans obtained. Therefore, they will try their best to get the medicine and all that. But it will get sorted. because you get certain debt repayments, if you get haircuts on loans and all that. So with that, because that's how we have been doing the economy for past couple of years, and when this tourism booms, when all this happens, you can run the economy. But there can be certain constraints like now vehicles you couldn't import for some time. Though those things will continue, but for essentials, what I feel is we should be able to facilitate essentials.
Question is about debt restructuring. I think we discussed about it as well, but they are asking about the process, I guess.
In debt restructuring process, if you go to IMF, what happens is they also negotiate with the countries from which we got the debt, and they can request for certain haircuts, like 20%, let's say. You don't need to pay that amount, and if that particular country agrees to stretch the loan, to stretch the tenor, change the repayment schedule, then there's no, IMF will intervene. If not, what happens is, if certain countries might agree, certain countries might not agree, IMF will settle that loan on behalf of us, and IMF can give us a loan separately. Then we have to repay it to IMF. So either way, it would happen. So it's a process. That's why we told it's a process. IMF itself can give us certain loans, or IMF can settle certain loans on behalf of us, and we'll have to pay it back to the IMF. So they will structure that in a way. Maybe we pay interest for the first couple of years, then all the capital repayments will be due, kind of. But IMF will ensure that we generate enough cash to settle these repayments. That's why they will intervene with the government. So we've got another question. As a country, we'll be able to get rid of this issue without getting bankrupted. Of course, we are not a bankrupt country. I told you we have assets. The worst case is selling one or two assets. Maybe like Port City, you develop and sell it. It was not a part of country, so it's something created. You sell it. I think can sell it for like at least 10-15 billion. You can sell it. Port City, USDs, I'm saying. So likewise, so we will not have the ownership, but there's something artificially created, you sell it. So we will never get bankrupt. Don't worry about it. Then there's another debt restructuring. Yes. Yeah, that we explained. Right. Okay.
So a popular question has been asked. The relationship between money printing and the rupee depreciation was taken into a huge discussion last days. So they are asking the real relationship between the money printing and the rupee depreciation.
It's like this. So money printing can create inflation to a certain extent because money supply is high. Then we have an economic theory called purchasing power parity. With that theory, what happens is when the inflation is high in a country, the exchange rate should depreciate. Exchange rate should depreciate. So that is the theory behind that. So when the inflation is high, so in that country, the exchange rate should be, because we have a principle called law of one price. So if similar goods should be traded at the same price in different economies. So if our inflation is high, what happens is a person from a different country buying our good, they should get an advantage through the exchange rate. So from his country, let's say from person from India, he buys that good for some amount of INR. When you buy it from Sri Lanka also, it should result in the same cost. If the price is high in Sri Lanka, exchange rate will get adjusted in a way that price is the same. Therefore, rupee will depreciate when the inflation is high. So that is the logic behind that.
All right. So thank you very much for the session, sir. Thank you very much for your valuable insights, messages, and your presentation. We are very proud to have you with us today, and we appreciate your punctuality for being present even before our session timing. We learned many things about Sri Lankan economy and also the crisis that has risen in Sri Lankan economy and what the solutions are that we can get to solve this crisis. Also, I would like to thank all the participants for their valuable participation and engaging with us for a fruitful session. I hope we addressed your need. Before we wind up, I would like to thank Mr. Akila Gunarathna once again for his wonderful job and all Vikings for their hard work behind the screen in organizing this workshop. So thank you and have a peaceful night. Take care and goodbye.